In Nebraska, water is managed by two separate but equally important groups. The Nebraska Department of Natural Resources, who manages surface water, and the 23 Nebraska Natural Resource Districts that manage groundwater. LB 962, passed in 2004, brings the two together to manage surface water and groundwater conjunctively. These are their stories.
Hi everybody, it's Alexa. I'm here with John, the General Manager at the Tri-Basin NRD, here to learn about how this NRD is unique from the others. Take it away, John.
Tri-Basin NRD is responsible for protecting the soil and water resources in Gosper, Phelps, and Kearney counties. That includes portions of the Platte, Republican, and Little Blue River basins. Tri-Basin is somewhat unique in that respect of regulating and working with producers in multiple river basins. That has produced some challenges and some unique opportunities for us. We're fortunate to have the Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District canal system covering much of the Platte Basin portion of our district. The utilization of surface water for irrigation has the side benefit of providing us with extra groundwater recharge. And so over the years, in much of our district, we have seen groundwater levels rise above where they were when irrigation development started. And so that provides us with some extra assurance of the sustainability of our groundwater supply as long as we can maintain this system. There have been some challenges for people using surface water in terms of availability and in terms of the water quality for irrigation. So a lot of irrigators prefer groundwater, and that has led to some reduction in the use of surface water, which has the follow-on of less groundwater recharge and more groundwater withdrawal. We want to try to address that situation. We have done it in a number of ways. Working with the Department of Natural Resources in the Platte Basin particularly, we've been able to utilize what are called excess flows in the Platte. And these excess flows are flows that are above and beyond what any water rights require and the requirements for endangered species and environmental flows. So when that water is available, we work with Central Public Power and Irrigation District to divert some of that water through their canal system. We put it into Elwood Reservoir. We also have been working with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to divert that water into federal wetlands. And that provides groundwater recharge. It also enhances wildlife habitat for migratory waterfowl. So we think of that as a real win-win project that we've been able to do in this district. That also then, over time, also enhances stream flows on tributaries to the Platte and Republican rivers. And so we're able to help offset depletions and help Nebraska maintain compliance with our interstate agreements in the Platte and Republican. So Tri-Basin is in a unique position where we can have some influence on both the Platte and Republican and Little Blue basins through the utilization of these excess flows. And because of our variability in groundwater supplies, we've had a very extensive monitoring program or an observation well program. The three counties in my district are probably the most intensively monitored groundwater system, certainly in Nebraska, if not in the world. We have 134 now dedicated observation wells, plus we measure another 90 irrigation wells, and Central Nebraska Public Power measures another 64 wells in the Platte Basin. So with all this data, we're able to track our groundwater supplies and groundwater movements fairly carefully. It's also enabled us to be more proactive and look for areas that could be potential future problems for decline and try to arrest those declines before they become serious. Particularly in Kearney County, we've had some concerns about reductions in surface water use, and so now we're working with Central and landowners to find ways to deliver excess flows to things like old reuse pits and privately owned wetlands to enhance groundwater recharge in that area. Another program that we have that is I believe, pretty innovative in this district is what we call our Water Conservation Incentive Program. And that program is a voluntary program that producers can enroll land in. There are two options. There's one for groundwater users, and there's one for what we call commingled water users. For a groundwater user, the program gives them an opportunity to show that they can save some water beyond what the average irrigation requirement is in this area. So they voluntarily accept an allocation, a limitation on their groundwater pumping. In exchange for that, they get the opportunity then, since we've limited the amount of water they can pump, we allow them to irrigate land that would otherwise not be irrigable because it's not certified for irrigation. In our district, we had to stop the development of new irrigated land in order to protect stream flows for the Platte and the Republican. We did that about 20 years ago. We also have a policy that allows landowners to move irrigated acres around with the intent that landowners, through the functioning of the market, would seek to irrigate the most valuable land and the most efficient to irrigate land and retire those acres that are difficult to irrigate, not very efficient. That has been the case, and so we've seen a lot of conversions from gravity furrow irrigation to center pivot irrigation, which requires much less water. The problem has become that our irrigators are becoming so efficient and they have consolidated their irrigated acres so effectively that there aren't opportunities for landowners to buy the certified acres from each other when they want to, for instance, take out some trees so that a pivot can go in a full circle, which is something we desire because that makes that pivot more efficient. Through our WCIP program, with that limited water use, we allow them to irrigate these uncertified acres. The acres don't become certified, and they're effectively spreading out the water that they are allowed through their allocation from the certified acres. So they're doing what we call deficit irrigating. They're irrigating less than the University of Nebraska or agronomic authorities would say you need to maximize yields, but they're doing it so that they can become more efficient and reduce their expenses. That we think has a lot of benefit for the producer and for the groundwater supply as a whole. So that's our groundwater option. The commingled option is sort of a different incentive in the sense that we want people to use that canal water. And so our incentive for them is we will pay their irrigation bill for Central Public Power, or reimburse them for that, as long as they limit their groundwater use. And so we allow them to pump up to an inch per acre without any consequence. If they feel, and it is their decision, if they feel they need more in a given year, we'll allow them to do that. But for every inch above that first inch, we reduce their payment, their reimbursement for the canal water. So that both provides the incentive to use the canal water, reduces the use of groundwater, increases groundwater recharge. That has proven to be a good option for a lot of irrigators as well. So that program, with, as I mentioned, assistance from the department's Water Resources Cash Fund, has been able to enroll now about 8,000 acres in those two options. And we're looking for other opportunities and certainly have pretty good landowner interest across the district. I had mentioned the Central Public Power and Irrigation District is a real critical component to recharge in this district and to water management. We are also working with the Platte River Recovery Program to help them to utilize these excess flows. And one way that we've done that is helping them to retime the availability of excess flows as they go through the system. For instance, you might divert excess flows from the Platte in May, allow them to seep into the ground. The Platte River Recovery Program has some wetland areas down by the Platte River. That water would seep into the ground and then flow toward the river. The problem is that water may arrive at the river in December when it's of no value to endangered species or to water users, or it may arrive in March when it would be ideal for whooping cranes or other endangered species. But there's no control over that because it's all dependent on the movement of the water through the ground. So we've worked with the recovery program to develop what we call an augmentation well field on a property called Cottonwood Ranch, southwest of Elm Creek, Nebraska. And those 8 wells can be turned on at any time remotely and operated to provide water to the Platte River through pipelines. That is water that has already been put in the ground by the Platte River Recovery Program from these excess flows, but we're sending it back to the river at times when it's most valuable. So it's more effective use of that recharge water. Other programs that we've been working on, as I mentioned, since we're a Tri-Basin NRD, we're always looking for opportunities to utilize resources to help all of our constituents, of course, and the Platte Basin generally has a larger water supply than the Republican Basin. There are opportunities, we've analyzed this, for utilization of excess flows from the Platte Basin to make up for shortfalls in the Republican Basin to help us stay in compliance with the Republican River Compact. So we've applied to the Department for water right in conjunction with Lower Republican NRD for what we call our Platte Republican diversion. That has been somewhat controversial. This would be the first trans-basin diversion in Nebraska. This is a common practice in the western United States generally, but it's just something that hasn't been done in Nebraska. So there are concerns about environmental impacts. I don't believe really there would be a negative impact to the Platte River because we're using these excess flows, and so all other needs should be satisfied. But we're trying to be attentive to the concerns about invasive species and so forth, and so trying to move that project forward, which we think would have benefits for both the Platte and Republican basins. We see opportunities to do that in the Little Blue Basin as well, where we have seen some groundwater declines. While most of this district has what we call the groundwater mound, an area where groundwater levels are higher than they were historically, the geology is not uniform underneath the three counties, and so there are areas where there just is not as much sand and gravel and not as much groundwater can be stored. The Little Blue Basin is an example of that in eastern Kearney County. So while it's an area that's not particularly intensively developed for irrigation, the aquifer can only sustain a relatively small number of acres. And so we've worked with the landowners to try to fit the usage to the supply. We haven't had to allocate water. We have taken some steps to limit the transfer of irrigated acres into areas where we feel there's an overdraft and provide incentives to landowners to move irrigated acres out of those sensitive areas. And we think that's having an impact in terms of at least stabilizing groundwater levels and assuring sustainability for us. One of the ways to ensure the sustainability of groundwater supplies is to understand all the variables involved. How much water is being contributed to the aquifer and how much water is being withdrawn from the aquifer in any given year. Just like a bank account, you have deposits and withdrawals. The deposits we can estimate from both weather data and from water delivery data from the Central Public Power and Irrigation District. The withdrawals, that information has to come from farmers' water use information. And in the Republican Basin, because of the Republican River Compact, that portion of the district is fully metered. All irrigation wells have meters on them. The Platte and Little Blue Basins don't have those legal requirements for metering. We do, in our rules and regulations, under certain conditions, require meters when we see groundwater declines. And so in those areas where we've seen declines in the Little Blue Basin, we have mandated meters. And now about 40% of the wells in the Little Blue portion of Tri-Basin NRD are metered and reporting their water use to us on an annual basis. In the Platte Basin, we have nearly 3,000 irrigation wells. About 20% of those are metered. We have incentives through our cost share programs, and now we also have additional incentives that we've been able to offer through a agreement with the Department of Natural Resources to provide remote reading flow meters that enable us to gather data without having to go out in the field. That's real useful in situations where a meter is difficult to access, problems during the growing season when farmer obviously doesn't want you going through his crop field. So we're starting to explore that option. We've also looked at what other NRDs have done. We do have a lot of electric wells in this district, and metering electrical use is pretty universal, so that data could provide us a proxy for the water use data that we would otherwise get from a flow meter. A flow meter is really the gold standard and mechanical flow meter for measuring water, but there are maintenance requirements and expenses that go with that, and obviously the requirement to actually go out and visit the meter and gather that data is a considerable time commitment for the district as well. So we're always looking at ways to improve our water use data. We have a very effective, I think, monitoring program of groundwater levels. So we applied to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation for a grant through their Water Smart program to develop a digital tool, so to speak, a simplified groundwater model that will enable us to figure out what the net balance is for recharge in any portion of the district. We've tried to break this down into a township level, a 6 mile by 6 mile square level, where we would be able to estimate the inputs to that groundwater supply in that block of acres and the withdrawals to look for on a average basis or even on a wet or dry year basis, are we a net positive or a net negative in terms of groundwater usage? So we feel like that'll be an important development for our district, an important advancement in terms of helping us to more precisely manage groundwater use. Another big issue in both the Platte and Republican basins is invasive species. And our primary concern for many years has been Phragmites, a tall reed that tends to grow well in aquatic environments. And this invasive weed has the potential to choke stream channels, and that causes problems both in terms of making floods worse, but also just in terms of reducing the ability of a stream to convey average flows. And the plants themselves, of course, consume water too, so they're somewhat of a parasitic water use that really has no beneficial use or benefit to that use, but is a consumption of our limited water supply. So we've worked actively with what are called weed management areas in Nebraska on both the Platte and Republican rivers over the past decade and more to go after these Phragmites, salt cedar, and other invasive aquatic weeds to both reduce flood impacts, improve stream flow conveyance, and hopefully reduce water consumption and increase recharge. It's not real exciting work. It's not real well-known work to the general public, but it's very important, and it must be sustained on a continual basis. If you stop treating these invasive species, you will rapidly revert to a condition where the stream channel is choked and flood potential is a lot greater. So it has to be a continual effort, and thanks to a lot of cooperation at the county, regional, and state level, we've managed to sustain a program like that for over a decade now, and I'm very pleased with the results of that. It also has benefits for recreational water users, people that like to kayak and canoe on the rivers, and for wildlife as well, because these invasive plants provide no wildlife habitat for native species. So we see that as a real win-win. 2024 would be the 20th anniversary of the passage of LB 962, which was a landmark law in Nebraska water management in terms of recognizing the need to coordinate management of surface water and groundwater for the benefit of both systems. Tri-Basin was involved in the development of that legislation. Senator Ed Schrock is a native of Phelps County here in our district, and of course he was the real father of LB 962. So we had a lot of input on that process, and having parts of the over-appropriated portion of the Platte River and portions of the Republican River Basin in our district, we immediately had to get involved in integrated water management. Even preceding LB 962, there was a bill called LB 108 that was primarily directed at the Republican River Basin, and that was passed in 1995, if I remember correctly. But Tri-Basin was the only district to develop what was called a water action plan under the old LB 108 rules, which we did for the Republican Basin portion of our district. And the key there is, because of the Central Public Power and Irrigation District delivering water to land that is relatively close to the divide between the Platte and Republican, water seeping out of the canals to some extent ends up in the Republican Basin. That water, since it comes from the Platte, is not part of the quote, virgin water supply of the Republican Basin. It's extra credit water that Nebraska can enhance its water supply in the Republican Basin. And that imported water, as it's referred to in the Republican River Compact, is all to Nebraska's credit. It's not divided between the three states involved in the compact. So our obligation at Tri-Basin NRD is to make sure that that imported water continues to provide a credit to the state, and that our irrigators don't use that imported water to an extent that it would reduce or eliminate that credit. Therefore, our focus has been on maintaining groundwater levels as they were in the 1980s. 1981 to 85 is our baseline for groundwater management. So we now have integrated management plans in all three of our river basins, the Platte, Republican, and Little Blue. In the Little Blue, it was a voluntary process because there is a compact on the Little Blue River, but we've never as a state violated that compact and really generally have a positive balance in our water supply in the Little Blue. But nonetheless, because of some groundwater supply issues locally that I've already alluded to, we feel that an IMP, which enables us to cooperate with both the department and Little Blue NRD, our neighbor to the east, that the process has been valuable in terms of just improving the cooperation, the understanding, and the coordination between the two neighboring NRDs and the department and its surface water management role. So the integrated management programs and plans that we have in place have been really beneficial to our district. They've helped us to stabilize the stream flows of tributaries to the Platte and Republican and protect those stream flows for other water users and for the environment as well. Like all Nebraska NRDs, Tri-Basin NRD has a website, tribasennrd.org. We have a lot of information on there about our programs and projects. Obviously, you can contact us through the website as well. We have also been, I think, kind of innovative in working with our farmers and getting our message to our producers through text messaging. And we have a program that we call our water use hotline. Initially, it was an 800 number. Farmers would call and find out crop water use in the area during the irrigation season. We found the use of the 800 number was declining, and so we went to a text message based delivery system, and we have nearly 1,000 farmers subscribed on that now, where they're getting a message once a day, 5 days a week, telling them, according to the weather data that we have in the district, how much water their crop has consumed in the past 3 days and the daily water use projected for the next day upcoming. That helps farmers to schedule their irrigation and become more efficient in terms of their irrigation water use. So we're glad to add people to that service. Contact us through our website or simply call our office at area code 308-995-6688.